Hi guys, welcome to our extra Questioning Behaviour episode where, well, we like to call them office hours, where you can come along and where you can listen to us having a short discussion about some extra topics that don't really make it into the main Questioning Behaviour episode.
I mean, it's predominantly PhD stuff because we have a lot to say. We've got a lot of experiences, but it's given the fact that we started this podcast with the idea of talking about interesting behavioral science related topics with people who are very interested in or very prominent in behavioral science. This type of episode doesn't really fit that pattern or that... that just doesn't really fit, but there's a lot we have to say about the PhD. We get a lot of questions about, doing a PhD, what it's like, what you should do, what you shouldn't do, and stuff like that. And we thought today it would actually be a really good idea to dive into the supervisor-supervisee relationship, or how I like to call it, managing your supervisor, because you'll have to. Neil's gonna kill me. Gosh. So both Sarah and I have two supervisors. So Sarah has Chris and Abigail. I've got Neil and Andrea. We're just putting their names out there because we're going to use them throughout this episode, probably interchangeably. So at least you can keep up with who belongs to who.
Who belongs to who?
Yeah, well, I mean, it doesn't make any sense if I start talking about Abigail, right? I don't think I've actually met Abigail. I know Chris, though.
Okay, yeah. Well... this is going to be an interesting episode. Let's just put it this way.
Yeah, we're trying our best to give you, useful tips and an insight into what this is like without actually completely slagging off our own supervisors, which, by the way, we actually like our supervisors, so that's really, really good.
Yeah,
but, shocking. We've been with them for 3 years. We don't actually mind their company. They're quite nice, we found out after 3 years.
It's a weird one because no one really tells you what a supervisor-supervisee relationship explicitly looks like before you start the PhD. You sort of have to figure it out yourself as to, okay, so what is this? Is this like a meeting with my manager and I'm sort of their underling? Is this sort of a collaboration, a research collaboration? Yeah, it can be a little bit strange when you first start because, I mean, I went in really with no idea, with no expectations for what to expect. And I would say this, I think each person's relationship with their supervisor can look very different. So we can only speak from our experiences, really. But I would say that we've had a pretty good experience with our supervisors, right?
Yeah.
Current supervisors.
I would say so. I mean, it's good that you mentioned the initial idea of the fact that you didn't have an initial idea. I very much came in with the idea of they know what they're doing. I'm fucking clueless. So I think it started off being very much manager and underling. Or
right.
I've never heard of the word underling, but I suppose it works in this scenario.
And, I feel like you'd love that word. I don't know why.
It's a good word. It describes it quite well. So, I would attend these meetings. So I meet both my supervisors very often at the same time. If I meet them separately, it's because I need something very separate from them. With Neil, I actually predominantly code. And with Andrea, I predominantly write. So I've got quite a distinction in that, although I do tend to meet them together. So that's actually quite interesting. And because these are their strengths, Neil's really good at coding, especially we do data analysis in R, and then Andrea is just really good at writing. If I send him a paragraph with 300 words, he'll return it to me with probably 60 edits, where I'm just okay, thanks. So they've got very different but complementary strengths, which for me is really, really good. And then as I became older and wiser, I suppose, or as, I've been in the PhD for longer, this relationship between managers, I suppose, and underling transformed into what I now perceive as much more of a collaboration. At least in my eyes, maybe they still think I'm absolutely useless, who knows? But it's become much more where I feel like I am completely in charge of my PhD and where I'm just if one of them has like all these crazy ideas, which is most likely to be Neil, that, I just look at him and be like, that's a load of shite. Like, I'm not doing any of that. And then, it's okay to say that to your supervisor, which is not the idea that I had from the start, where I could just look him dead in the eye and be like, you're spewing pure bullshit. Like, mate, leave it. Which is funny.
Okay.
So I feel like there's been like a lot of progress in that relationship, or like a lot of growth, if you will. Do you feel the same? Like, do you feel like you've had the same progress or growth, if you will?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think what you were saying about different strengths of each supervisor is very true as well in my case. So both my supervisors have this amazing ability to articulate ideas and thoughts, which is amazing. I mean, particularly Chris has this amazing writing style where he can sort of talk to anyone. So you don't need to have any understanding of the topic or any years of experience in the field. But when he talks about it, you get it. So that's been fascinating. And both of my supervisors, Chris and Abigail, have loads of amazing experience running experiments. So Abigail particularly has run loads of field experiments and lab in the field experiments. So it's always been really interesting to get both of their perspectives, because they don't always agree, but we always end up having really good discussions from it. So that's been great. I feel really privileged to have both of them as my supervisors, and I think for me, the way that my relationship has changed is that I've grown a bit more confident over the course of the PhD, which Merle could probably attest to, because you knew me right from the beginning.
I did.
And I think something that Abigail said to me one time after a supervision, I think she said, Sarah, I feel as though you really have been able to put out your point of view, and you've had an opinion, and you were able to steer the discussion and take a bit of control over the meeting. And I thought I was like, oh yeah, I guess I kind of did. And that for me has been where I think I've seen a lot of progress myself, is rather than seeing myself as you say, the underling, I've started to see that actually I do have an opinion, or I can have a point of view. Because it sounds so silly, but for a long time it was very difficult for me to have an opinion, because I really just didn't feel like I knew anything in comparison. Yeah, at all. I was like, well, how could I possibly have an opinion? I don't know anything.
I don't think that's silly at all, because I mean, like, I'm quite a confident and a very outspoken person.
What?
Who would have thought? But the idea is still that, I started the PhD, I think I was 21, about to turn 22, and I'm dealing with people who are, first of all, twice my age, who've got 2 decades of experience on me. And even I was a bit like, well, if you've got an idea, let me hear that first. And then, if your idea is 10 times better than mine, I'm definitely not going to tell you my idea, stuff like that. Or I mean, it is a bit, it's a bit of a waiting game. And I think in general, it's also the idea of when you start your PhD. So both my supervisors taught me in the first master's degree that I did. I had a slight feeling of who they were as people, which is how I picked Andrea, because Neil actually offered to supervise me, and I was like, you know what, I'll take you up on that. And I picked them for their respective skills, but I already knew their personality, which is really, really convenient. Like, I knew that Andrea is very meticulous. He's an experimental economist by background, and he's really, really nice to work with. He's very precise. He's never late with anything. That is just his working style. And I knew that before I signed up, to do a PhD with him. Neil is actually quite a different person. So you're working with very, very different personalities. Not that Neil is like late with things, but he's a bit more forgetful. He's a completely different way of organizing his work, and his working style is different. And of course, then I'm the third person within this relationship, I suppose. And my working styles is also different. I'm less meticulous than Andrea, but I am a stickler for deadlines. And then my writing is worse than Andrea's writing is, and then my coding is worse than Neil's coding is. But I feel like, I grasp the topic. I feel like out of the three of us, I know the most about payment methods by this stage. So you after a while you bring completely different things to the table, which is just a very, very interesting relationship.
I mean, for me, my confidence has always been a really big hurdle. And, it's not just an internal thing. There were external things that happened to make me doubt my confidence, which I won't go into on the podcast. But actually, the start of my PhD, it was pretty rocky because of some of this external stuff. So I didn't have the best start to everything. But what I would say is that actually my relationships with my supervisors have been fundamental in me actually developing my own confidence and my point of view and my skills. And they have given me a lot of support that I didn't actually expect them to give me. So, sort of actual emotional support. I thought it would just be, here's some feedback on your ideas, go away, do this, and do this. And I think some supervisors are like that. They're very much to the point, delivering feedback, in a timely manner. But I think, at least in this first couple of years, I just needed someone to tell me that I was doing okay,
Sure.
And my supervisors did that for me without even me having to ask. So that was, pretty fundamental for me. I'm the type of person that sometimes I just need to hear that, you're okay. This is actually good. Don't doubt yourself so much. So I think I owe them a lot for that, which is, it's been a journey, the whole supervisor relationship, but it's been great.
I think a lot of people from both sides, so both the supervisees, so us, and the supervisors, so them, underestimate like how much of a supporting role they're actually playing. And with supporting, I don't mean research, I mean more like emotional support. And I feel like a lot of PhD students are effectively missing this, and this is something that I think is quite problematic. So I'm not accusing anyone specifically, I'm really not. But there are these supervisors who do meet their student like once a month or whenever they have the time, and they jam through what the student has done so far, and they maybe give a couple of pointers, if that, because I've heard of situations where even the 1 hour monthly meeting was absolutely useless. Or it didn't point in a new direction, or if they had been given pointers, they didn't know what to do with them, or the feedback was just, this is not what you should be doing, and that's all the feedback you're getting. And I feel like we have been really, really lucky with the supervisors that we are with now. I mean, obviously we in after what's that called, behind closed doors, is that the expression?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah,
of course, if we've had a run-in with our supervisors that was less than ideal, we slagged them off, and I'm sure they slag us off as well, or they complain about us, and that's completely fine because that's human. But like, all in all, I'm quite happy with mine, regardless of the sometimes issues I have with them. But there are relationships that actually get more into the useful, information providing part of this episode. Like, you can get stuck with a supervisor who is less than ideal, to put it very politely.
It depends on the individual, right? So some people I know just want to get the information. They're just like, I want to know what I need to do here, what I need to take away from this, and very practical.
Yeah.
But again, you can sort of say that, okay, maybe they're talking a big game, of being like, yeah, I can take the criticism. Give me all the criticism.
Yeah, just tell me everything I've done wrong, which I'm like,
it takes a toll. It does take a toll, I think. And I think that's something people underestimate, is how much criticism you get in academia. I think it might have been our head of school who said this to a friend of mine. He said that being an academic is the perfect job, so long as you don't mind hearing people's opinions and criticisms of your work every day for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
If you can get to a place where you can deal with that and you have enough resilience, to separate criticisms of your work and criticisms of you and all of these other things, that actually academia is, he says, the perfect job, which I thought was quite interesting. I don't know.
That's
Is
nice.
academia the perfect job, Merle?
I mean, I'm good with it so far. That's
Okay.
that's all I'm giving away. No, but to get back, if you are stuck with a supervisor, that's I mean, this is the thing. Like, what we have to keep in mind is, like, supervisors are people, and there is, yeah, it sounds a bit dumb, but, like, they're not machines, and they've taken you on as a supervisee for a reason. This is both, because they, to their own benefit as well. So this is a thing which I think a lot of people don't realize, but, like, if you publish papers and you publish good papers, your supervisor's name is on them. Like, they have something to gain from this relationship as well. Because I know a lot of people are very hesitant to ask for additional meetings or ask for additional feedback or really ask for anything because they feel like they're a bother to their supervisor. But I'm like, that's their job. Like, there is a lot to gain from, for them, from just helping you out.
Yeah, I mean, I've always had a bit of like question marks in my mind about how much of my relationship with my supervisors is transactional in that way, because it's never really explicitly said that, okay, all the work that we do together is going to be work that all three of us will have our names on. And that's, I mean, I've like been writing a paper and thinking, do my supervisors even want their names on this?
Hey, don't be like that. Come on, man.
But in a sense that, okay, maybe the paper that I'm working on for part of my thesis, maybe this is actually not really related to the type of work that they are doing. It's not really within their wheelhouse, so to speak. And I think maybe that's the little self-confidence monster in my brain that's literally like, who would even want to voluntarily put their name on this?
Okay, now you're just going completely off a very unrelated imposter syndrome fueled tangent.
But it is interesting because I get to the point where, like, I would be thinking about submitting a paper to a conference and it says name the authors on the paper, and I'd realize we've never actually had a discussion as to whether whose names is on this paper, whose name wants to be on this paper.
I think they assume.
I find that so awkward to ask. I mean, I'd be like, of course, everyone did work on this paper, put your names on it. But I always feel a bit like, it's a bit awkward to be like, hey, so you want your name on this paper, right?
That's the default option.
Well, I don't know. It's a weird conversation to have because we've never really said it explicitly from the off. But I guess when you start talking about a project, you don't even know whether it will make it past the design phase often. So
I love it. At least you made it to the design phase. I've had so much shit shut down in, like, the conceptual phase. When I looked at the data set and I was like, I think this would be cool to draw out. And Neil was just looking at me, he's like, that's impossible to do. Or, like, that is not interesting, or that's just not publishable. And I'm like, yeah, I suppose it isn't.
That's good. I mean, like, at least then you're not wasting any more effort or time than you need to on something that won't go anywhere. So that's pretty good.
That's pretty good. No, I got lucky with the fact that Neil, well, I mean, Andrea as well, but they're both really quite honest. But I think they're quite honest because I'm quite honest. So, I mean, throughout this relationship, if you get to know each other better, like, they do, hopefully, I mean, if you meet them often enough, if you get to know them well enough, like, you do adapt your behavior to each other. As in, I know what I can say to Neil, I know what I can say to Andrea, and, like, which is highly inappropriate, and it goes the same for them. So, like, no, but it helps. If you're a very honest and direct person, you don't want, like, a British person, so Neil happens to be British, Andrea is Italian, to, like, beat around the bush for, like, 6 minutes. Like, I don't have the time. Just tell me that it's shit and let's move on. But there are, of course, people who are different cultures, different backgrounds, different age, different life experience, who, if a supervisor were to tell them, like, this is shit, do something else completely again, or just do it again, or, like, read a fucking statistics book, which I have been told because my statistics isn't that. I've been told at the beginning because I admitted that my statistics wasn't that good, and Neil was just like, read a fucking book then. I'm like, okay.
There you go.
I thought, I mean, it's that's the solution that you need to hear. But yeah, if you're not like me, like that might be quite a shocking thing to hear. And so I think as soon as you've picked a supervisor, for whatever reason you pick them, because do have a good motivation for this, I do think it might be an uncomfortable conversation, but I think it might be a good idea to, from quite early on, when you have your meetings, sit down with each other. Obviously, I
Yeah.
mean, you could do this standing up, but then, sit down preferably, and just talk about what you expect from each other. Because I feel like
Right.
that is a very good conversation to have at the start. Because otherwise, you might end up like me. And I think it was about January, February of my second year. So I no longer had any courses. The structure went completely out of the window. And what happened was that I was so fed up with the way that the project was going, and that, I felt like there was a complete disconnect between my supervisors and I, that I ended up crying and screaming in Neil's office, with both of them present, but we tend to meet in Neil's office. And it was just, it was ugly, and I don't want this for anyone else. But it was just such a pile up of frustrations that just got released, where I was like, this isn't fucking working. I don't know what I'm doing. You don't seem to know what you're doing. And then Neil just said, okay, this is clearly not working. Let's do it differently then. But then, this was in my second year. Frustrations had been building up for, I think, at least 5 months. So, I could have had this conversation much earlier. And this is something I would recommend to everyone. Just sit down, tell your supervisor what type of person you are. So, do some introspection. Be like, I would prefer to have these type of meetings. So I prefer to have meetings once a week, especially with regards to coding, because I don't want to be stuck on a coding problem like fucking 4 weeks. It's just really unproductive. For writing, I don't really care. They can check that in their own time. This type of stuff. So how often do you want meetings? How long do you want meetings? Do you prefer meetings in person, or do you prefer them, or do you not mind them being over Skype? Because it is possible that your supervisor isn't always in the country. And if you know that a supervisor travels a lot, or maybe even a potential supervisor, is that a reason to not work with them? And do you want one supervisor? Do you want two? Do you want to have like additional collaborators? What is the one thing that you need most help with? Like, if you're fluent in SQL, C++, Python, and R, like that's probably not what you should meet about. I think you should be fine. So it's this type of shit. And then, you say what you want and what you would like. And then the supervisor, of course, has the time to make their counter argument, I suppose, to be like, this is how I normally work. Because a lot of supervisors, they're like, if you suggested them that you meet on a weekly basis, some of them might look at you and be like, weekly? I hardly see my students, on a monthly basis, because some people are really, really independent, and that's fine. So it's your working style now meets their working style, and you have to figure it out. So do that.
Yeah. Well, I think that's really good advice, actually, of just sitting down right at the beginning. Yeah, you're welcome. Right at the beginning of this journey, and just asking, what are your expectations of me, and what does a good supervisory relationship look like to you?
Yeah.
So, because I think something that doesn't really get talked about explicitly is that you do feel the power dynamic when you are the student right at the beginning. You do, it's like this weird inferiority complex, but you do feel as though, okay, well, I'm the person with no experience here, with no clout, with no power. And so you do feel as though, okay, well, let's just assume that your supervisors know what's appropriate and what's a good supervisory relationship, and just let them take the lead. But this is all sort of done, I guess, a little bit implicitly. Nothing is necessarily said explicitly. And I think, Merle, your situation, I relate to that so much, of having things build up over time, either insecurities or frustrations, and not feeling as though you can voice them necessarily.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I've never felt like I couldn't voice them. I was just the idiot that didn't. And that can get really, really problematic. And I effectively did this to myself, because my supervisors have always been very, very open. And when I finally had my outburst, they were very, very supportive. So they can't be blamed for any of this, really. But I think another thing that a lot of people don't really talk about, and I understand why they don't talk about it, but like these relationships, they can break down. Like you can
Yes.
have opted in for a supervisor who wasn't exactly the person that you thought they were. And this can be for a variety of reasons. So I've already met some supervisors are just busy or like never in the country, and you only meet them like once a month via Skype. For some people, that's a completely fine match. Other people, especially if you don't expect this, that might not be enough to work with, or that might just not be productive or supportive enough or whatever. And that's fine. But then what you're going to need to do is switch supervisors, and that's something that a lot of people also don't talk about, but this is not that uncommon.
Yeah, I mean, full disclosure, my supervisors who were on my funding application, well, one of them it wasn't my supervisor by the time I started the PhD. And to be honest, I mean, my circumstances aside, the whole switching supervisors itself was a little bit scary. I mean, partly, I guess, in my case, Chris, who was my supervisor when I applied and is still my supervisor, he sort of said, "Okay, well, let me have a think about who I think would be a good fit on our team." So he took the lead really and came back to me with Abigail's name, and I was, very, very happy with having Abigail as my supervisor. I'd been taught by her and I was familiar with her, and it's turned out really well. But that's a case where I changed supervisors, but I didn't really it wasn't really me that said, okay, I want to switch from this supervisor to this supervisor explicitly. So it all worked out really well. I'm not sure how that happened because I don't think I really had any hand in it. So I guess that's more luck, and also I guess Chris having the experience to know who in the department we would all work well together with, and he's been proven right.
Yeah, but that's not that surprising. I mean, it's not odd to me to ask your first supervisor to figure out, what to do with your second. And some people have very clear first supervisors, and then they get a second later on. So I did it slightly differently, but I mean, it ended up, I've got two supervisors. Don't ask me which one is my first, because I genuinely don't know. I think that's somewhere on a funding sheet, but for the rest, I wouldn't even be aware. But I think it's just really important to know that if you're stuck in a rut or in a hard spot, or between a rock and a hard place or something like that, you should sit down with your supervisor and you should be very honest. The earlier, the better. And
right.
So you can just sort it out. And then what might be is that your supervisor and you won't see eye to eye, or really, things have happened that really aren't appropriate in a supervisory relationship. And that's not okay, but it does happen. And the best thing for you to do is be completely honest, but also, face the fact that this relationship is not going to bring you anything positive, anything productive. And if you have a friend, which is just, awful to you, you drop them as a friend, and because they're not adding anything positive to your life. And it's not that different with a supervisor. I mean, they'll know you a bit less than the average friend, I think, and the relationship is professional rather than, friendship based. But it's not that different. It's not that different. If you don't like your supervisor, if you despise being in the same room with them, or if as soon as you start talking about your ideas versus their ideas, and it's an argument after argument, and like there is no support or no understanding, no empathy, then this is probably not a good relationship. And then switching is really recommended, or at least taking on an additional supervisor to sort of become like a mediator even. But I would just stop that relationship as it stands right there, because it seems very unproductive. And a lot of people, I think, are afraid for backlash if they switch supervisors. I've never heard of a case where there was backlash. Like, it's sometimes you just don't work together. Like, the supervisor isn't going to be surprised when you tell them, hey, I don't feel like we're really vibing. Like, they're not blind, okay? Like, they know that something's going on.
Yeah, I think we can't underestimate how difficult it is to actually have the courage to have that conversation initially. I mean, I know some people, in my year, for example, who their supervisors just weren't experts in what they wanted to do their PhD on. And, they had been allocated these supervisors rather than specifically chosen. And sometimes this happens. Sometimes there's just a mismatch. And in these cases, it's difficult to just say, hey, I don't think that we're a good match, because you don't want it to make it feel personal. And obviously each situation is going to be different. If, your supervisor is just behaving inappropriately or making you feel uncomfortable, then, obviously you shouldn't have to go through that in order to get your PhD, At the end of the day, it is your PhD. You're spending 4 years of your life studying and working on these projects, and not having a good relationship with your supervisors or not having a good match with your supervisors necessarily can just make your life so much more difficult than it needs to be. So what I would say is, if you're thinking about having this conversation, just try and remind yourself, it may not necessarily be a personal thing about your supervisor's ability at all. But at the end of the day, it's your PhD and you need to advocate for yourself. But I mean, there are so many reasons potentially why you might not want to continue with someone as your supervisor. It's difficult to give advice as to how to approach the situation, but
no, true. It can be so many reasons. It can be cultural, emotional, I don't know, spiritual, who knows. It could even be a gender mismatch. I've heard that before, that some supervisees or supervisors find out they really do have a preference for working with a certain type of person, and that type tends to be more dominantly found in one gender than the other. It sounds really odd, but I have seen this before.
It does sound odd.
No,
really?
one supervisor just really, really preferred working with men. And I think that's just because they could take a lot more criticism. At least that was their reasoning for it. And I was like, ooh, we should work together. That could be fun. They're not one of my supervisors, but I think it would be funny for me to work with them. I think it would be an interesting relationship.
That sounds fishy to me.
It does sound
really fishy.
It is kind of whatever, but like, these things do exist, that supervisors are people with a lot of work experience who as a result have preferences. So, and as a supervisee, and biases, oh, absolutely. And this can also go the other way around. Like, maybe one person has a preference for working with women. I don't know. Maybe they're harder working. Maybe they're cleverer. Like, it depends on the bias that you have about a gender, about a culture, about an age group, about someone who came straight out of the masters, or someone who's already had some working experience. There's a vast difference in PhD students. There's a massive heterogeneity in what type of student goes into a PhD, or what type of person goes into a PhD. And unsurprisingly, there's a massive heterogeneity in supervisors, or just people in general in academia. So unsurprisingly, not every match is successful.
Yeah.
And not every match is ideal. I think most matches are satisficing at best.
Yes, that's good. That's true. Yeah, so I mean, that's my advice would be really just to, at the beginning of this supervisor-supervisee relationship, where it's not really clear what necessarily your relationship is going to look like or what the expectations are, you can have that open and honest conversation about, okay, I'm the naive person here, but what do you find works best, with your supervisees? How often do you tend to meet? What's your style? What do you expect from me? All of these sort of questions that are non-confrontational, but can actually spark a discussion that makes all these implicit things that you sort of tread around carefully, and you think, oh gosh, maybe I'm supposed to act like this, or I don't know whether my supervisor is supposed to give me this advice or this advice, I'm not really sure. It can help make them a bit more explicit. And I think then it's easier to discuss once things have been brought up into the open, so to speak. So definitely a conversation to have, I would say.
I couldn't agree more. And I think, I think that's effectively it for this episode. if you have any more questions about, our specific relationships with our supervisors, or how to pick a supervisor, or if you have a specific issue that, you'd like to air, or you want some tips on, I mean, please just do reach out to us. You can find us on all the socials. They'll be linked down below. And or just share a really good or like a really bad experience you've had with a supervisor. I enjoy reading those. Okay, I'm on all those hashtag PhD threads on Twitter. I enjoy reading that. So yeah, please just do reach out. We hope this episode was useful to you. Worst case scenario, just entertaining. And yeah, that's it. So as said before, these episodes tend to release on Thursdays. So that's all academia/PhD topics. And then we'll see, or hopefully see you next Monday to actually talk about behavioral science again. And until then, we hope you have a good week, or I guess a good weekend.
Yeah. Thanks for coming to the office hour.
See ya.